podcast. This week, we are very fortunate to have a very special guest on the show, Jimi Gibson. Jimi, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to know a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about this journey that you've got, and obviously tell us all about the Thrive Agency.
Yeah, great to be here, Greg. Good to meet y'all and Daniel for the first time. So Thrive Agency is a full service digital marketing agency. We have some UK clients, but mostly in the US. We've been around for 20 years, which is sort of a unicorn in the digital marketing space. My career actually started as a professional magician, which is kind of an interesting transition from a marketing conversation. But as I thought about it, if you reverse engineer a magic trick, that's pretty much the structure of how you need to gather attention, activate curiosity, bring whatever it is you're trying to do to a conversion or a big finale. And so maybe we'll get into that a little bit. I got a magic kit when I was like 6 years old, and it just kind of took off. In middle school, I was doing magic shows for my friends, and their parents were paying me to perform for my friends at their birthday party, which was kind of cool. And then I met a guy who worked at an ad agency when I was in high school. He was a little bit older than me, and he was interested in me talking with a multinational global brand. It's a franchise company we've all heard of. And they needed a promotional entertainer to do a bunch of shows. So in high school, I was doing probably 50 shows a year, making some pretty good money, more than working retail or cutting lawns. And that relationship lasted for about 16 years. And I was always fascinated with hanging out at the ad agency, and then thought I might get into marketing and advertising, and have worked at a number of agencies. Started out as a graphic designer and then worked my way to creative director, and then was running an agency. And yeah, I think there's a left brain, right brain approach to marketing, and customers are not interested in pretty pictures. They're interested in something that's going to convert and bring more leads and sales. And yeah, I've worked with a lot of executives who have moved into the coaching realm, and excited to dig into how we can help your audience maybe do better with their personal branding and understand what the world is these days. It's a little bit crazy with all the AI stuff that's going on, and maybe we'll get into that as well. So yeah, I would say that's a quick overview.
Jimi, that's fantastic. Thanks so much. And I love that spin, that magician. And I'm going to put that perfectly on your plate in a minute, Dan. So you better warm up for something that I'm going to ask you. I loved an article you wrote in Forbes, right? And there's obviously a stat that I got from Forbes a long time ago, and it's stuck in my mind. It's something that me and Dan use a lot. 90% of coaches quit or fail in their first year. 50,000 new ICF coaches, or wherever they come from, all over the world, they get that big qualification. They go on the world of social media and trying to advertise themselves, like that invisible coach that we talked about, and they fail, right? Basically because of visibility. That made me think a lot about that magician thought process that you had. Dan, is that similar to how you think about the hooks that you write and the content that you write? How does that fit in with your mindset when it comes to posting material?
Yeah, well, obviously this magician kind of brand is really good, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere if Jimi didn't obviously know what he was doing, and he backs up his brand and his visuals with what he delivers. So we had the same, almost similar kind of branding thing with Katrina a couple of weeks ago with the business witch, which was really interesting as well. I think you really need to first sort out what you do, and be able to deliver on what you do, and then you can start to optimize your brand, and kind of describe yourself as a magician or a business witch or anything like this, and it's really going to make you memorable, in a good way. You don't want to be memorable for being that guy who under delivers and he calls himself a magician or whatever. It's just not going to work.
Absolutely. So, Jimi, that brings me on to the next point. We were speaking a lot about TEDx, right? So that must be such a weapon for you, being able to use that for visibility, being able to use that as, almost like proof, if that makes sense. Talk me through a little bit more about that. Talk me through like the power of maybe being on the stage, or does that give you more sort of like, yeah, like I said, proof in terms of what you're putting out there?
Yeah, and I think we'll get into establishing authority and credibility. And there's lots of things going on with these large language model ways that results are happening, especially for coaches and people in those positions. You know, TED has a great brand, and it is a little bit of a badge that you can wear. It was one of my bucket list items that I wanted to be able to say that I did that, but you can't force that to happen. I actually applied multiple times, but what happened through that process was it was all about me. I wanted to get on that stage and tell my story and have the spotlight focused on me. But really, their whole mantra is ideas worth spreading. And an idea worth spreading is something that is not focused on you, it's focused off of you. And so my wife and I had an opportunity to travel to Rwanda. We were sponsoring a child, and we got to meet that child. And through the course of meeting that child, and I won't give it away, maybe folks will watch the TEDx and we can provide a link somewhere in the notes. But I had in my head what I wanted that trip to be about. And we got home and it wasn't about me being this famous magician who went to a foreign country and did some magic tricks and impressed everybody. But it was actually something that happened from a medical perspective with this young man. And then the fact that I was actively performing magic shows. And what happened was the dots got connected outside of my control, and I was just a player in the process. And I think when we try to force something to happen and when we try to um, not be aware of what's going on around us and that it's a bigger world out there, we lose sight of these connection points. And so there's a term that I used in the TEDx talk called your personal abracadabra. And when you look at a brand, and Dan just mentioned, and you know, I did listen to the episode with Katrina and the witch, and when you step out and you talk about something that you're passionate about, you have to own it, and you have to, like Dan said, you have to deliver. And so I used to feel bad about mentioning the fact that I was a magician, but it actually is a great icebreaker, and then it brings up a lot of conversations. And so when I had the opportunity to submit the application again, and it wasn't about me, then it was natural. It felt smooth. It felt like, oh, okay, this is actually a message that would mean something to somebody else. And I think that's the biggest thing that came out of it is once I let it go and once I stopped trying to force the issue and have it be all about me, then this thing happened and it connected with the audience. And yeah, I put it on my resume. I put it on my LinkedIn profile. It does open doors. It does have people ask questions like you just asked. And I'm just, I guess, humbled by the fact that it all worked out. Um,
Yeah.
so
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. And it brings me into that authority bias. You know, I love psychology and stats. And it's like, you know, people are more likely to trust visible, confident experts, you know. And I think that TEDx, you know, and that Forbes article you got is fantastic. So for any coaches that are watching this and they're looking at how to get up the ladder or to, you know, gain more influence on LinkedIn, that's two fantastic avenues there. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add to that? Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people on LinkedIn, on the feed, on X as well, that you've got to really have your message really clear to yourself, especially because if even you don't know what your message is, then no one's going to know what your message is, and it's not going to really land you any results that you want. So, I mean, TEDx is a massive thing. I mean, we can't really compete with that, but you know, Greg's got the story.
This is
Go on.
something else. Yeah, no. Sorry, Dan. I'm sorry to jump in, Jimmy. I would be not too scared to do TEDx. Dan, that's a good point, isn't it? Would I get up and say the wrong thing? You know, if it was going to go up to that sort of audience, would I put myself in a position where I slip up? That would probably be my biggest question to you, Jimmy. Is like, did you rehearse it? Did you know? You know, how did you go about planning the speech? We can come into that in a minute. Dan, I'll let you finish. I just, I probably shouldn't have butted in there, but I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. I was just going to say about your story about how you were a great experienced life coach, but you were still not getting clients. And that definitely resonates with a lot of people as well. You've got
Yeah.
to have your clear story, why you're doing what you're doing, as well as what you do, which is going to help people. And that's all I was going to say, really.
Absolutely. I've got a good question for you, Jimmy. Now it's more like, have you heard of the mere exposure effect? So
Yeah.
it's that way that the more that people see you, the more they trust you. Yeah. So you've got the TEDx, you've got the Forbes. Tell us a little bit more. Like, what else do you tell us about some of these other weapons that you've got in your arsenal?
Well, there is an effect that you've just mentioned. The people who are more visible tend to be more trusted. We probably have people show up in our feeds on our various social profiles. Sometimes it's not the most qualified person, but they are out there and they're putting themselves out there. And so I had this strange relationship with social media that I just didn't want to add more to the trash pile that was out there. And I was not creating online. And anytime that I have a strong opinion about something, I tend to ask myself, well, where did that opinion come from? I think it can be imposter syndrome. You don't think that this is good enough for anybody else to learn from. But then you also look at maybe some of the other information that's out there and you think, well, I wouldn't say it that way. But what right do I have to say that if I'm not the one contributing to a better message, right? And so I enrolled in a cohort. I know y'all have a cohort. I think they're wonderful. That I had to launch 30 pieces of content in 30 days, so one every day. Well, what ended up happening from that is I continued to do that. That turned into a podcast that I did and delivered every week for a year. That was a phase. I may bring that back. Um, but once you step out of your comfort zone and realize that people need to hear what uh, you have to say, and we might talk about my 5-finger method for content creation, because I think it can get people off of go and allow them to really be passionate about what they need to talk about and how they can help other people, which is basically the coaching career, right? So I would say I was the only person at Thrive who was championing for being that voice. I submitted articles to Forbes. I'm now writing for Entrepreneur. When people were not interested in being on a podcast, I said, I'll do it. And so the owner actually came to me back in October and said, you seem to like this. I'd like for you to be the face of the company. And so through that process of just doing what you enjoy and sharing, now that didn't start the minute he asked me, that started 18 months before, right? And so if you want to be considered for opportunities, if you're in a larger organization, if you are wanting to land that bigger client, you've got to think, you've got to dig the well before you get thirsty. And so I don't want to go down a whole list of things related to resume items or things like that, but I think you just have to have a mindset of stepping into the uncomfortable, being okay with being bad. And there's a state where you cross a threshold. It's called the liminal state. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be. And, in classic story structure, it's where the hero is called to adventure and they refuse the call. A guide shows up and then they cross that threshold into the unknown. And that's a scary place to be, which is why cohort works great. So congrats for y'all doing that. Um, so I would say in a general sense, I just keep looking for the next thing that I can uh, be okay with being bad at. I wasn't very good at video. I'd art directed many photo shoots and video shoots in my career as a creative director, but I really didn't know operationally how that worked. And so again, about 12 months ago, I said, I'm going to figure this out. And I made a commitment that I would post a video every day, Monday through Friday on LinkedIn. And that was 6 months of a video being released every single day. Now, at that time, video was being pushed and the impressions were good. Right now, it's not so much. So I've actually stopped posting a video every day and I had to reconsider what my goals were. And right now, carousels, cheat sheets, those types of posts are doing better. So it's the same message. It's just a different format. So I know that was a little bit longer answer to a simple question, but um, yeah, I would say try a bunch of different things. Uh, Look at your metrics, make sure it's getting you the result that you want. for me, I knew that writing for these publications was a good move. And so I really, in my mind, I said, I'm going to make this happen. We're going to figure out how this works. And so I think it's a mindset thing and just being uncomfortable and just gritting your teeth and going for it.
Love it. Jimmy, I was just dialed in as well, all the way through that. And Dan, that is a little bit what we deal with, isn't it, every day? And I can see Dan is itching to ask a few questions there. Because Dan, that is a lot of the stuff that we are dealing with, isn't it? A lot of the problems, working out about the difference between, is it good to post a video every day? How you repurpose your content, etc., etc., etc. Dan, I know you're desperate to ask a few questions there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about it opening up opportunities internally as well as externally outside of the company. Because we talk about all the time, external clients and connections and all this. But it actually allows you to maximize your potential within your company as well, which is a really important thing. But I was going to ask, how many platforms do you use? Is it just LinkedIn? Is it just, and the articles, of course, or do you go on any other platforms as well?
Yeah. So I think our tendency is to want to be everywhere. There's a billion people on LinkedIn for the business that we're interested in attracting. There's way more people on LinkedIn than you would ever be able to connect with. It has the highest income of any of the platforms. And so if you want to land some larger clients and some higher ticket clients, that's the place to be. I'm fascinated with YouTube because it is a search engine and there is a lot of discoverability, but it's a hard platform to get traction on. I'll talk about LinkedIn in a second because I've also had a love-hate relationship with it, and I'm turning the corner on that. If you look at some of these more visual platforms like Instagram and TikTok, Facebook has, some demographics that may work for some other folks. Video is very short. How can you tell a longer story? Are you trying to deplatform that crowd into an email list? What is the purpose for being on those platforms? And so I've made the choice now that I'm going to commit to LinkedIn. And there are some techniques and some things that can transfer to these other platforms. But if I try to spread myself too thin, love the book Essentialism. They talk about diluting your efforts and spreading out all of your energy across too many things, and you're not going to be very good at all of them. And so for me personally, it doesn't mean somebody else. I'm going to commit to LinkedIn. Once I have that dialed in, then I can take and learn. But if I'm trying to learn how to navigate the algorithm and what to say and how to say it on multiple platforms, I won't have time to do work. I won't have time to work with clients. So I think those are choices. As far as LinkedIn goes, LinkedIn is a very ephemeral platform like other platforms. YouTube has staying power, and videos that were posted 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago are still getting traction. When you put something out on LinkedIn, it can get a boost a few days, a few weeks after posting, but whatever time and energy you spend on creating that is kind of going to go away. And I had a problem with that. But what I've come to know is because I was thinking about it in that way, I wasn't putting the value and the time and the energy into the post. And it wasn't getting noticed. I would batch create 20 videos in a day. Were each of those videos the best effort I could put forth? No. So it's caused me to rethink how I go about posting. It's actually caused me to dig a little bit deeper and to provide that great value that people are looking for. And the other thing is, it blows my mind. I mentioned a billion people on LinkedIn. The percentage of people that are actually posting is like 1 to 2%. So if you can raise your hand, if you can be omnipresent, if you can, and we can talk about LinkedIn techniques if you want to go down that path, but to me, it's in the infancy of creators being able to connect with high ticket clients. And so that's why I've made that commitment.
I love that. I love that. Dan, I know you're desperate to go into why X wasn't bought up once during all that, because that's a really interesting part for me and Dan. We are on everything. All right. So, and this is what we propose to everyone as well. It's almost like the bigger net that you create is the opportunity to create a community, to add to your newsletter, just as you said with Instagram, right? And then you can nurture them slowly. And that comes back into that, doesn't that, selective attention, mere exposure effect, that the more they get to see you. And we worked out for all the spreadsheets that we have that people want to see you between 6 and 8 times before they actually put themselves in a position to buy. But one thing we found with X is this, which is crucial in terms of coaching. And this is how Dan changed my whole approach to actually how I sign clients myself and how we recommend, that we put out to others, was Dan creating relationships through DM strategy, actually getting to know people, and X has got an amazing outreach, isn't it, Dan? Dan, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because actually we do transfer some of those skills over, Dan, don't we, from X to LinkedIn? And Dan, like I said, Dan's an expert at this. So Dan, talk us through a little bit more of that and relate that to what Jimmy was talking about in terms of LinkedIn.
X and LinkedIn they're pretty similar, but also quite different at the same time. What you said about the essentialism, I heard essentialism. I think what you're thinking of it in platforms where like you only want to focus on LinkedIn. I would change that to you only want to focus on writing, maybe. So it's really transferable, the skills between LinkedIn and X. The hook writing on LinkedIn is what's probably the most important thing, I would say. Those first 2 lines, getting people's attention. It's so transferable to X because, well, even more so on X, really, because they're shorter tweets and it's all about standing out, really, with your message and your voice. So I would definitely be on X as well. If you've written a LinkedIn post, if it's taking you maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, why not copy paste that onto X and see what happens, or copy paste that in smaller paragraphs, maybe break up the paragraphs, add a lesson each to the paragraphs. Because obviously it's shorter form content. It's pretty similar, the writing platforms. And I would say the same thing with video as well. If you're doing YouTube videos or podcasts, why not clip that up, turn it onto TikToks, turn it into Instagram Reels? You're not going to dominate those platforms. We're not dominating those platforms. Our main thing is X and a little bit of LinkedIn. My microphone just dropped here, sorry. And then it's really transferable, those skills, and that repurposing of the content is going to take you an extra couple of seconds, so it's definitely worth your time, I would say. That's what I'd say there.
Yeah,
Jimmy, I'll just step in. One interesting thing that I picked up on was time, that you're worried about actually spending time with your clients. And this is obviously a big thing, isn't it, for us? We time block down, don't we, make sure that it doesn't. So we actually were able to come up with a scheduling content system to repurpose, so that one video we could put out, Dan, couldn't we, 6, 7 times or whatever it was. There are so many tricks, let's just go on to the tactics, and the AI frightens me and excites me all at the same time in terms of how far you can create that outreach. And Jimmy, I guess that leads on really well, isn't it? Is this like LinkedIn rabbit hole, this area that you wanted to lead into in terms of tactics and strategy? So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up the content distribution approach. I don't disagree with that at all. I think, from a digital marketing agency perspective and what we're actually able to do for clients, that's very time intensive, and that takes, that's not something that you can really hand off until you have a process and a procedure down in the client's voice, that type of thing. And so I would say in early stages, it's good to get your message down, understand what you're talking about before you start to distribute it across. But once you have that down, then you're exactly right. Then you can slice and dice and put that on other platforms, because people have affinities to various platforms. They want to consume information in a different way. Some people want to read, some people want to be entertained. So yeah, I don't disagree. Maybe I need to sign up for Dan's X cohort and he can school me because y'all have had some great results. Yeah, I would say, just tactically on LinkedIn, and we see this happen with all the platforms, they tend to copy each other because they're all fighting for eyeballs. And, TikTok has started with the short videos that transferred over to Reels. LinkedIn tried that for a while. We have shorts on YouTube. And so, again, they're all valuable for their own reasons. There are some demographic slants to various platforms. There are some things that need to be understood about how you post. Dan, you mentioned the 2-line hook, 65 characters in the first line, about 40 some characters in the second line. Before that more button is available, are you going to be able to get their attention? We're trying to stop the scroll, own the thumb, those types of things. These are all, again, the nuts and bolts of how to go about it, but it all starts with, what is your message? Dan, you said that at the very beginning. If you don't have that dialed in, you don't know what to say, then you feel kind of paralyzed because there's all these options out there. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? I'm going to shoot a video. I'm going to write text. So I have a cool little thing. I call it the 5-finger method of content creation. We could go over that, and that might be helpful to folks.
I'd love to hear about that. Let's go for it.
So for those of you listening, you probably can't see my hand, but I'm holding up my left hand. I'll start with the pinky. And so if you're a coach out there, you've made a promise. You've made a promise to your prospect that you're talking to. You made a promise to your client. It's the pinky promise that we all made on the playground, right? So you say, I swear a pinky promise, and you did not break that promise. That was a binding contract. And so what promise are you making to deliver on? And that's a great place to start, talking about what your brand is all about, where your passions are, what are you guaranteeing? Do you have testimonials? Do you have case studies? Those types of things. So the pinky promise. The next one is the ring finger. So in many places around the world, that's where you wear your wedding band. There was a legend that there was a vein that connected from that finger to your heart. They called it the venus amoris. I disproved it, but it's a cool legend. You may think that's about a promise, but it's actually about the passion. What is the passion that you bring to this engagement? Why did you get started coaching? Do you want to make a difference? You mentioned that, this ridiculous figure about coaching practices that fail. It's because you've lost that passion. You've gotten in the weeds with how to functionally go about the business. And it's also about commitment. Are you in this for the long haul? Is this a long-term relationship? Or are you just a one-off, 3 sessions and you're done? My wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary. My parents just celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary. I'm in it for the long haul. I don't think I'll make it to 65 years, but think about your clients and those long-term relationships. The next one is the middle finger. Some people think that's a vulgar act. It's actually an act of defiance. Who's the villain? If you truly believe that your coaching service is going to help your client, who do you need to save them from? What is the alternative that's not going to turn out the way that you can help them get through whatever the situation is, that transformation, right? The next one is the pointy finger. And I said pointy finger for a reason. In the US during the war, there was a big campaign with Uncle Sam, and there was a poster of Uncle Sam pointing, "We want you." You have to know who you're pointing at. Who is your ideal client? What do you know about them deeply? And then when you turn your hand over, you can beckon them in with that same finger and say, "Come here. I have something that's going to change your life or transform you in some particular way." It's also the symbol for number 1, which is a singular point of focus. We talked about essentialism. So any landing page or any communication should be directed at one person. You should be solving one problem. You should have one offer that is solving and offering one solution. And the next one is the thumb. The thumb is the universal symbol for things are going great. We've also seen memes about do this, don't do that. And so thumbs down is doing things bad. But it's really about what thumbprint are you leaving? What mark are you leaving on that relationship with your client. What mark are you leaving? What legacy are you leaving in the world? I have 3 sets of twins as nieces and nephews. They can open their phones with their Face ID. They can't open it with their thumbprint. It's unique to each one of us. And so if you're stuck on creating content, you carry this hand around with you all day. You probably got 100 different content things to let people know who you are, what you're about, what you're committed to, what your core values are. And that's a great place to start.
Wow. I was so dialed in all the way through that. Jimmy, I do have one final question for you, which I'm going to come on to in a minute. But Dan, I know you're probably desperate to ask something else from all of that.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually never heard that before. I think maybe we don't talk enough about the actual foundations of why people create content and the purpose of it as well. So that was really good. Thank you for that.
Sure. I guess it goes back to magicians using their hands, and it was a natural place to start.
It was brilliant.
Jimmy, excellent. I've got sort of one final question for you. Me and Dan see coaches every week, and I must have dealt with hundreds of coaches over the last few years. In this business, there's so many charlatans, right? There's so many people that are like false prophets. You can tell they're not sincere. And that's one of the things that we changed, wasn't it, Dan? Is actually not trying to hunt money, but actually trying to genuinely trying to help people. And I can see that in you in abundance from the way that you talk, from leading up into the podcast and everything, which is amazing. What's the bigger picture for you? And also behind that, what was the guy that motivated? Who was your like role model to create this drive as well?
Wow, that's a big question to end on. Yeah, I would say
there's a character there behind this. So I need to know a little bit more about, where you see this going, because I can see as well you're a big picture guy, and I know there was someone that probably planted that light bulb moment in your mind.
Yeah. I would say through school, I was the guy with the Cliff Notes trying to take the shortcut, and I never read a book until I graduated from high school. And I thought I had succeeded in cheating the system. And I got into the business world, and people started talking about these books. And I was like, okay, come on, that's just boring stuff. I became addicted to reading, and I would read biographies about all sorts of different people. My wife teases me because I would love to hook up an intravenous drip that would you could put a book on a drip and it could just, get right into your brain. I wouldn't say there was one particular person. I would say it's a combination of many different people. And if people have been recommending various books, then I made it a point to study that book and read that book. A lot of people were recommending the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was in a concentration camp, and he analyzed what it took to survive that situation. So I read that book. There was a book, a photographer called I'm Possible, Jeremy Cowart, Cowart. And he talked about sending out all of his talents into the world and being able to organize people and be very prolific with his abundance. And so I would say every book that got stacked up, I just gave away about 200 books so I could make more room on my bookshelf. And you're missing out if you're not filling your head with other people's wisdom and other people's knowledge and experience. I would say I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. And what did I learn from those books? That it takes a forensic approach to analyzing every piece of evidence that's making a campaign work or making it not work. And so I just have a thirst for, number one, being in my lane and not trying to do something somebody else, looking to people like y'all who have figured out how to empower people, and then understanding that everybody's on a different journey, and you have a responsibility to encourage them and to identify skills in them, because we all think we're not good enough. We all think, I'm not the right person, but you would be amazed at how one little word, one little piece of encouragement. We have a belief at Thrive that we need to be part of a better world. And so we give a Kiva loan. We have about 1,000 active clients, and various clients rotate in and out. But for every new client, we ask a person in the company to participate in giving a Kiva loan to somebody around the world. We measure monetary giving and volunteer hours with our team, because we believe it's the right thing to do. We discourage overtime because we believe that if you're not healthy and happy, you're not going to be any good to us as a team member. And so all of these things are the collective knowledge of doing things the right way. I would say follow 5 or 6 people, whether they be online, whether they be creating a mastermind. I saw somebody had created a custom GPT and acquired documents from maybe 4 or 5 legendary people that have passed on. And when they have a question, they type into that custom GPT and they're able to get the knowledge of those people to help them through something. And so I think that's a cool way to go about it. So that might not be an exact answer to pin who inspired me, but I think maybe that can be helpful to other people, just to be thirsty for knowledge and to not look in the mirror, to look through a window and find out who you can help and who you can encourage and who you can give a leg up to.
Wow, amazing. Again, dialed in, glued to the screen. Dan, anything you want to ask him before we round up for today?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what is the biggest mistake you see people making on LinkedIn, would you say? Because obviously your main platform is LinkedIn. You probably see a lot of people come and go. Possibly we see that a lot on X. What's the biggest mistake, would you say?
I think people consider it like a slot machine. I'm going to put my quarter in and I'm going to win the jackpot, right? And we all get them if you're active on, and I'm sure it happens on X too. There's a connection request, and then immediately they start with the slap pitch to sell you something. And you have not gone through the process of establishing that relationship, piquing some curiosity, um, giving before asking to receive. And it's not a short-term investment. It takes time. The biggest creators and the biggest names on LinkedIn average about 250 comments a month on other people's posts, and helpful comments, not AI generated contents. And so that ends up being about 25 mentions or comments a day. And so you're not going to be able to automate that. You have to treat it as if you are walking into a coffee shop. Would you go up to somebody and sit down at the table, be rude, and start selling them? And that's, I think, the biggest thing that not only discourages people, but also turns off everybody else from getting on the platform or accepting a genuine invite request, because people have sort of tainted the pool.
I love that. Greg always talks about as well how people need to see you 7 times before they trust you. He loves these stats. And it's really true. The warm DMs do so much better than the cold DMs. So I completely agree with that.
And Dan, there's one interesting thing. We don't talk about our DM strategy. It's a little hot, isn't it, Dan? It's a bit like Fight Club. And the first rule of Fight Club is obviously you don't talk about it. We obviously talk about it to our clients, but it's something we're not going to talk about on a podcast that's going to be recorded. But there is so much there that fits into that strategy, Dan, isn't it? About not going in with the hard sell, building up a relationship, and just being honest and sincere as well. I think that's most important. Jimmy, it's been a pleasure to have you on. It's some absolute gems, nuggets. I was dialed in through all those stories as well. Where's the best place to find you?
Well, obviously LinkedIn, and would be happy to jump on a chat with anybody who's got some more questions about what we talked about during the show. If you want to check out thriveagency.com, if you need some digital marketing, or there's plenty of articles. I write an article on our blog every month, and then there's about a 20-minute video on YouTube that explains some concept about marketing. So I would say those are two good places to start.
Wow, amazing. Jimmy, thank you for joining us. Dan, thanks for your wisdom as always. And remember, don't fall into the coach trap.